Upgrades.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review. Today, we are bringing you the latest from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Possibly the final ride that we're going to get from the Guardians and the writer-director of this film, which is Mr. James Gunn. But here's a quick synopsis. Still reeling from the loss of Gamora, Peter must rally his team to defend the universe and protect one of their own. If the mission is not completed successfully, it could possibly lead to the end of the Guardians as we know them. And here we have the same cast that we have grown to love so far in these 3 films, plus a holiday special. Start off Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Bautista as Drax. We have Carrie Gillan as Nebula. We have, I'm trying to think of the new ones to talk about here, because that's the most important part. Will Porter as Adam Warlock. Chikuti Iwuji playing the High Evolutionary in this film here. And obviously Bradley Cooper, who voices Rocket, and Vin Diesel, who says, "I am Groot." And that's all he does, ever. But yet, he gets an acting credit for this movie. That's amazing. But, initial thoughts is, anyone who's heard any of our reviews here on JVS know how much I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. That is my favorite Marvel movie. To me, one of the best superhero films ever made. It is great on so many levels. Now, Volume 2 was a big step down from Volume 1. And the holiday special, to me, was the one that flipped and turned this whole series back around again. The holiday special is extremely good of this. So going into Volume 3, I'm not going to say I had high expectations, but I kind of felt that they had righted the ship and we were going to get a film that showed that. I'll start off first by saying this is a very emotional film here. If you've seen any trailers, you understand that this film goes into the backstory of Rocket. Now, I'll say here, I'm not going to spoil you anything humanly possible because I don't want to do that, because that's something that you all need to experience. But it does go into the backstory of Rocket here. And in doing so, you get the complete emotional weight of this film. And it feels like at times the entire emotional weight of the film is carried by Rocket's character from the past and the present. And it's unexpected. It's something that I'm not 100% sure is successful, because it kind of at times felt like the way we got a holiday special with the Guardians, maybe we should have gotten a Rocket Origins type of special instead of putting it into this film, because when you put it into this film and he becomes the most interesting storyline, you kind of don't care much about the other characters, because this Rocket story is so interesting, so well written, well directed. Like it's amazing what they do with Rocket's story along the lines of just any big drama that you can imagine, of a coming of age story, maker creator type of story. It gives you everything humanly possible that you could want in this type of film to have Rocket's story. And that story is something that I don't think anyone is going to dislike. Now here's the problem with that story. This film tonally doesn't know what it wants to be, because we get this emotional weight with Rocket. At times with the other characters, they feel to either be lost, a little silly at times. The jokes aren't the best in the world. They don't necessarily land the way they needed to land here. And because it's so emotionally heavy with the main story, when you get to these side stories and they attempt to interject humor into it, it really, really struggles. And some of this has just gone stale over time. Like we've seen Drax. We understand what he is. We understand the way he is played here. And at this point, is it something that we constantly need to see? It kind of has run itself into the ground. Even Mantis, who came in on Volume 2, like even hers is running into the ground. I think the most interesting elements of this film were Rocket, Gamora, and Nebula. They had all of them had extremely interesting storylines and arcs in this film. while everyone else felt like they regressed a little bit, those three characters really did a lot to carry this film. But again, because the tone is all over the place at times with this film, I don't know, as a viewer, what should I be looking towards for a Guardians movie, especially with this being Volume 3. The first movie was a family film. The second film really leaned hard into that family aspect a little bit, and then I attempted to put emotional aspects in it too. Not necessarily work nearly as good as it does here in Volume 3, but at least we had a gauge of what these Guardians films were. This film, Volume 3, feels like a film I would not take anyone under the age of 14 to see. It's language in this film, and I'll just say it that way. It is, they use some very crass language in this film that completely threw me off guard that it was in this movie when it happened. And because of that, and because of just the overall tone of the story and the way it's shot, I think it may be too dark. Literally for possibly half of the audience that would want to see this film is possibly too dark for them to see. And I that's where the tone gets all over the place, because it still attempts to give you the jokes, but it doesn't necessarily elevate the jokes to the level of its audience. Now with this darker tone film, it was giving you jokes the same equivalent that you would get in Volume 1, and you're like, oh, that can't work in a film this dark. And I think that is the issue here, along with one other character, and that is Adam Warlock. I don't know much about the comics. I'll be the first person to tell you that. I've never felt before that a character was as wasted as this character is in this film, and that's because I believe the hype. When we went to Comic-Con, they talked about Adam Warlock. I hear people who love Marvel talk about how big of a character Adam Warlock is. If this is supposed to be the introduction to Adam Warlock and Drax are almost the exact same character to me at this point. It comes across as overly silly. I never believed him as any form of a threat or any form of a helping hand or anything of that nature. I think it was they really struggled trying to pinpoint what that character needed to do besides just being a movie. And that is the problem, is that you can't have a character that big that so many people are looking forward to seeing and then be confused on why that person is even in this movie. And then we get to the High Evolutionary. Mr. Wuji is a great actor. Hands down a great actor. This also is a problem because coming off of Ant-Man, which, whether you like it, whether you hate it, everyone still was elated by Jonathan Majors' performance. Here we have a villain who world ideas are just as grand at times, but it's also at times just overly silly, and it throws me off. Now, the villain is a main cog to Rocket's story, and it really works well when we see that played out. But even then, at times, it feels like I'm not necessarily watching this amazing actor play this character. It feels like I'm watching him do a caricature of what a villain should be. And with all the jokes and all the unnecessary just body flailing and everything, it at times took me out of this movie when he was on screen, because I'm like, okay, he doesn't even come across as a threat. And I think that, again, that it goes back to the tone of the film. I think that's the biggest issue here with Guardians 3 is the tone of this film. It is all over the place. It's possibly the weakest soundtrack out of all three of the films. But because it's so all over the place and it doesn't necessarily know what it needs to be as a film, it struggles a lot more than what I expected. Now, I will say I still think from a film perspective, it's better than Volume 2. Easily for me. From a film perspective, it's better than Volume 2. It is not nearly as entertaining as Volume 2. Because, again, I don't know who this film is made for. At one point in time, it feels like it wants to make you cry. Then it feels like it wants you to love action. Then it feels like it wants you to fall for the most juvenile jokes humanly possible. And because of all of that, and because it's not done well, the symmetry of it is not completely there when they go through those different elements, it just feels so out of place. And I just didn't fully get it. But again, it's a Guardians film. You're here to have fun. Now, for people who love the MCU, the best I can say is possibly this is definitely a rebound over Ant-Man. This could be a rebound for most people over Phase 4. This is still a solid entry. It reminds me of Shang-Chi a little bit in the way that it gives Marvel fans what they want and what you all have been craving to get from a film. Not necessarily a good film, but it has enough elements in it where you'll like it enough where I think maybe some people will repeat watch it, but again, it will be an older audience because this is not for children. And I don't know any person who should, again, take anyone under the age of 14 to see this. So if you have kids who love the Guardians series and who love the holiday special, and then you come into this film, this is not for them. And because of that, I think that's what's going to cause the discord amongst the audience at times when you see these audience reactions come out of this film, is that I don't think people are going to understand fully what they watched. I literally left the theater and I was asked, what did I think? And I said, I don't know what I just watched. Like, it starts off like gangbusters. It's a lot of action, but it's talky, action-packed. But it's so relentless in its start that you kind of get lost on what's the point of the film. And the film is about 20-25 minutes too long. Because even dealing with the depths of an emotional story like they attempt to give you here, the problem is it's still not enough story to last for the close to 2.5 hours that this film is. It could have easily been cut by 20-25 minutes to give you a better story. So in the end, I would say that's the issue with Guardians. It gives enough promise. It's elements in this film that are great. The whole origin and story of Rocket is probably one of the best you'll see in the MCU. The problem is nothing else is. Nothing else comes close to measuring up to that. And not necessarily just in a comparison standpoint. It doesn't even measure up in a sense if it was standalone, completely separate from Rocket's story. It's still not necessarily the best of stories here for the remaining members of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that's the problem for this ragtag crew that people fell in love with in Volume 1 for us to be at Volume 3 through, 7 or 8 movies that this team has been in. The Guardian series, the Avengers movies, the Thor movies, whatever else that they've been in. It's a lot of stuff that this team has done together. But amazingly, none of them feel like they've grown at all, except for Rocket in this film. Like, we really see that character Rocket really coming to his own in this film, while everyone else, it just feels like they fell by the wayside here. Chris Pratt, Star-Lord, is completely wasted in this film. He could have almost not been in it, and I don't think there's anything you would have truly missed. They give a subplot with him and Gamora. We understand that complex relationship that them two currently have because of everything that transpired between them two in the other Marvel films. But still, it's not enough there for you to overly care about it. But from a visual standpoint, this is the best I've seen the MCU do from a visual standpoint. This movie looks beautiful. James really directed this film well. The shots are amazing. The again, as I brought up before, the soundtrack, not as good as the prior films, but it's not horrible. It's just not as good as the prior films. But just from a visual standpoint, directional standpoint, grade A. Here, it's the writing that kind of fails it a lot because you invested so much into one character when you have a film that technically you can say there's no lead, but they're like a good 4 or 5 characters that you have to give an ample amount of the story to here. And I understand that we're going to do possibly the final chapters for the Guardians, and Rocket is kind of the only character you haven't seen with a expanded origin story. We got that from Drax already. We kind of got it from Groot. We got it from Gamora and Nebula, and we got it from Peter, but we hadn't gotten it from Rocket. So this is their time to try to correct that, but it just feels like that correction should have been made in a special with just Rocket and not in the final chapter of Guardians of the Galaxy. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, brought to you from Marvel Studios. This film drops May the 5th. out of a possible 10, I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a 6 out of 10. Again, it's a fun enough ride for people who love the MCU. The Rocket story is amazing. You just got to understand, tonally it's all over the place. It's really jumbled at times. It's about 20 to 25 minutes too long. It has serious flaws. So this is not the perfect rebound movie that people were looking for from the MCU. But at least in the end, it's better than Ant-Man. And that's all you can really ask for, is to be better than the last film in a series of films. And possibly it's better than Volume 2. Personally, I've not seen Volume 2 in years. But it feels like, as a film, it's better than Volume 2. But again, from an entertainment standpoint, I don't think it comes close to measuring up to any of the 3 prior Galaxy or the Guardians projects. But check it out. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.